For the purposes of this review, I'd like to state that I'll mostly be covering the European release of the game. The North American version has some major differences which I'll come to shortly. The International Superstar Soccer series was once the go-to series on the N64. After the terrible FIFA 64, the better FIFA 98, and then the fantastic FIFA 99, finally EA has upped their game to really challenge Konami for the console's best football game. The problem was that ISS 98 was for its time almost perfect. Aside from the lack of licenses and slightly blurry visuals, the gameplay was top notch, and if you were a lad here in Europe, then this upcoming release of ISS 2000 was on your summer shopping list already. After several delays, the game finally landed on store shelves, and for the first time an ISS game arrived on the N64 to mixed reviews. To start the ball rolling, it was the graphics that most reviewers of the time seemed to take issue with. Most commented that there was no real visual bump from ISS 98, which in part is true. There is the optional high-res mode with the expansion pack enabled, but honestly the game is nearly unplayable in high-res. Everything chugs along and free-flowing football is replaced with a jittery mess which really shows the console struggling with the developer's ambitions. However, when playing the game in the standard resolution, the game comes to life. Whilst it is slower than previous versions, the on-screen action feels a little more simulation-like than the arcade strengths of the first games. The animations are also top-notch, and whilst they don't meet up to EA's motion-captured movements, there's some really welcome nice additions. The audio is also a big improvement. The ball hits sound deeper and more lifelike, and the dynamic audio is also superb. When the camera moves in closer for events like throw-ins and corners, you'll be able to pick out individual people shouting from the crowd. The menu music is as always upbeat, and it fits well within the style of the game. Whilst all of the standard game modes are present, such as exhibitions, cups, leagues, training, and the ever-present scenario mode with new events to play through, Konami really upped the ante and thought of something truly groundbreaking for the time, as long as you didn't own the North American version. There's no definitive reason I could find as to why this happened, but the RPG mode which is present in the European and Japanese versions was pulled from the North American cards. To compensate for this, the North American version was the only version to contain some real player names, but there are no teams with 100% complete accuracy. This RPG mode was perhaps the game's most unique selling point, and for a console with so few role-playing games, it's strange that one of the console's best ones is almost a side game in this sports title. The RPG mode sees you start off as a rookie in your team, and your overall aim is to become and be one of the world's best players playing in the World Cup finals. This is easier said than done though. Throughout the storyline there are lots of twists and turns. Older players may like you and want to help your career. Superstars may join your team and take an instant dislike to you and want to do everything they can to hold you down in your place. You also have to deal with loneliness, healing from injuries, and taking care of your body as well as your mind. And of course a classic love interest shows up and you have a wealth of different women to try to seduce. There are so many different ways in which your storyline can play out that I personally believe I spent more time playing this than the actual core football game itself to see all of the different branching paths. Sure, some of the writing is corny and it can get repetitive when you need to train and build your stats, but small events that take place between matches help to keep things feeling fresh. My personal favourite events are ones where you get challenged to a sporting duel by a teammate and must prove your worth to them to try and dislodge them from their starting place in the team. I would have liked to have seen the studio expand on this in later versions of the series, but sadly this wasn't to be. Instead it feels almost like an experiment that a programmer came up with, much like the multiplayer mode in GoldenEye which was put into the game late in development. However it came about is one of the best remembered modes in the game, and with so many people not ever wanting to play sports games, this is perhaps one that you should check out. Sadly though, the North American version is one of the rarest releases despite the game being fairly easy to pick up in Europe. My personal advice for those not in Europe would be to import a PAL version of this game, because without the RPG mode the game is but a slight improvement over ISS 98. You could say that with the release of ISS 2000 the N64 evolution was complete, with each of the 3 games in the series seeing improvements, some minor and some much more important, but essentially we were left with what has to be one of the most complete and enjoyable football games on the console. But how do you remember this game? Like me, do you recall so many hours trying to find ways to impress your manager in the RPG mode, or did you have countless sleepovers playing this game with friends to decide who is the best player in your school? As always, let me know your thoughts and feelings in the comments section down below, and until next time.